All right, let's talk about a real classic today, the 80-20 rule. It's that go-to productivity hack we all think we have dialed in. But what if the way we're using it is completely backward? What if that relentless drive for efficiency is actually setting us up for a huge disaster? Yeah, let's get into it. You've heard this a million times, right? The Pareto principle. 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts. 80% of your company's profits come from 20% of its customers. It's pitched as this ultimate shortcut to success, promising these massive returns for just a tiny bit of focused effort. It feels so simple, so powerful. And that, right there, is the big question we're going to tackle. Because the very thing that makes the 80-20 rule so tempting, that intense, laser-like focus on what seems to matter most, is also a hidden trap. It's a trap that can lead to stagnation and, in the worst cases, total collapse. To really understand how this happens, we've got to go back, way back. We need to see how a simple observation about how the world works got twisted into a rigid commandment for how we should work.
So it all started back in 1906 with an economist, Vilfredo Pareto. He was just looking at land ownership in Italy and noticed a pattern. He was simply describing a reality he saw. It was an observation, that's it. But then, decades later, a management consultant named Joseph Juran takes this idea and turns it into a prescription. He used it as a tool for efficiency, to separate the vital few from the trivial many. And that right there is the crucial shift where all the trouble begins.
And here's the first thing we really need to get straight. The Pareto principle is not a law of physics. It's a heuristic, a rule of thumb. It's just a catchy, memorable name for a much deeper mathematical concept called the Pareto distribution. That 80-20 ratio, it's almost never a perfect 80-20. So treating it like some unbreakable law of the universe, that's our first big mistake. And that mistake, well, it leads us straight into a pretty wild mathematical trap. I like to call it the ever-shrinking 20%. It sounds super clever on the surface, but when you look a little closer, it's kind of absurd. The logic goes something like this. Hey, if focusing on the top 20% is good, then focusing on the top 20% of that 20% must be even better. It's this seductive myth of infinite optimization. But, let's actually do the math and see what happens. Okay, so the first time you apply the rule, you're down to 20%. The second time, you're already down to just 4% of your original pool. Let's do it again. Now you're at a minuscule 0.8%.
One more time for good measure. You're now focusing on a ridiculous 0.16% of what you started with. You see how fast this gets silly?
This table just lays it all out plain as day. Just look at that marginal gain column. Your first application is a massive win, an 80-point gain. Awesome. But the second application gets you just 16 points. The third, a tiny 3.2. By the fourth round, you are burning tons of energy to chase less than a single percentage point of improvement. This isn't efficiency, it's perfectionism, and frankly, it's just bad business.
But this flawed thinking leads to an even more dangerous idea. The myth that the other 80%, the stuff we're not focusing on, is just useless waste that we should cut away without a second thought.
To see why this is so wrong, let me paint you a picture. Thinking the 80% is useless is like a soccer coach looking at game stats and saying, hey, 80% of our ball possession doesn't directly lead to a goal, so let's just stop doing that.
So what happens if he does that? The team would completely fall apart. They'd lose all their rhythm, their control of the game, they'd lose their entire defensive structure. By cutting out the ineffective 80% of possession, the coach has actually made the effective 20% impossible, and he's left his team wide open to attack. See, that 80% provides the invisible foundation that allows the 20% to even exist.
In the business world, this hidden value actually has a name. It's called organizational slack. It's all the stuff that a hyper-efficient mindset calls waste. The extra time, the extra staff, the extra capital just sitting there. But in reality, that so-called waste is the very engine that allows a company to survive a crisis and innovate for the future.
And this slack isn't just one thing. It's the cash reserves that get you through a recession. It's the people in supposedly inefficient departments that you can suddenly redirect in an emergency. It's that spare capacity that fuels your next big idea. And get this, research actually shows a positive link between a company having the slack and its long-term financial performance. It's not waste, it's a strategic asset.
And this trade-off is absolutely stark when you lay it out. Just look at the patterns here. You drop your low-profit customers to get a quick margin boost, but you end up destroying your reputation. You cut redundant staff to lower costs today, but you create this incredibly brittle system that has zero capacity to innovate for tomorrow. Every single one of these short-term gains comes with a heavy long-term price.
You know, the funny thing is, our modern digital economy provides the perfect counter-argument. The Pareto principle was born from a world of physical scarcity. Think of a bookstore with limited shelf space. Of course you focus on the bestsellers. But in today's world of digital abundance, a whole new model is king, the long tail. Here, the real money isn't just in the top 20% bestsellers, it's in the massive, aggregated sum of the unpopular 80%. For companies like Amazon or Netflix, the mission isn't elimination, it's aggregation.
So after all that, where does this leave us? Well, we can't just throw the rule out, but we definitely need to move past these myths and completely reimagine how we use this powerful tool.
And this right here is the new mindset. The goal can't be 100% efficiency. Why? Because a system with zero slack, zero buffer is a system that is guaranteed to have zero adaptability. It'll break at the first sign of trouble. The real goal has to be something different. Let's call it optimal sufficiency. It's about balancing that drive for efficiency with the resilience we need to survive and thrive in the real world.
So how do we actually do this? It really comes down to 3 steps. First, prioritize, but don't just eliminate. Use the 80 rule to find where you have the most leverage, not as an excuse to burn everything else to the ground. Second, recognize the interdependence. Ask yourself, how is that unproductive 80% actually supporting my star players? And finally, actively balance efficiency with resilience. You have to consciously protect that organizational slack, because that's where your future growth, your future ideas, and your ability to survive a crisis will come from.
So I'll leave you with one final, crucial question to chew on. Take a hard look at your own work, your own team, your own company. In your noble quest to be more efficient, are you accidentally creating a hidden and maybe even catastrophic fragility?